Hey, thanks so much for being here and watching this video. If you enjoy this kind of content, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. I'm working toward hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support truly makes a difference. Don't forget to leave a like so more people can discover this story. Every video I make takes time, effort, and a lot of care just for you. Feel free to share it with your friends and make sure to stick around until the end. I hope you enjoy it. At my birthday, my family cheered as my dad told me to give up my house. For my sister, I stayed calm, lifted my glass, and exposed something that shut everyone up. The moment he said it, something in me didn't snap. It locked into place. Not anger, not shock. Something colder. Final. My dad stood there, glass raised, like he'd just announced a generous act of love. Like I was supposed to feel honored. Around him, heads nodded. Forks paused midair, and I could feel it. The shift. Not a suggestion. A decision already made without me. "We all agree," he repeated, slower this time, like I might have missed it. "Sell your house. Give the money to your sister." The room leaned in. My cousins started clapping first. Not loud, but enough to set it off. My aunt chimed in, voice syrupy, talking about family stepping up. My uncle raised his glass toward me like I'd already said yes. And my mom, God, she was smiling. Soft, expectant, like she was waiting for me to do the right thing. Across from me, my sister dabbed at her eyes, too neat, too controlled. I knew that performance. I'd seen it since middle school, every time she needed sympathy, every time she wanted something redirected away from me and onto her. Her husband tightened his arm around her, watching me like I was a problem he expected to be solved quickly. I just sat there, fork suspended, steak cooling on the plate. My house. The 3-bedroom bungalow I'd scraped and saved for. Years of saying no to vacations, no to upgrades, no to anything unnecessary. Weekends spent sanding floors until my hands ached, repainting walls alone with a playlist looping because silence got too loud. The first thing that was actually mine. And they'd already decided it wasn't anymore. The noise in the restaurant blurred into something distant. I could see lips moving, hear fragments slipping through. Medical bills. Babies are expensive. You're single now. That one landed harder than the rest. Single now. Like it stripped me down to something temporary. Disposable. Like the house was wasted on me because there wasn't a wife or a kid inside it to justify its existence. Someone laughed softly. Someone else added that I made good money, that I'd be fine, that I could bounce back. Bounce back from what? Giving away everything? No one asked. That was the part that pressed in, tight against my ribs. Not one person at that table had pulled me aside before tonight. No conversation, no hesitation. Just a quiet, collective agreement about my life, my money, my property. And then this. A birthday dinner I was paying for. An audience I funded. A decision delivered like a toast. I set my fork down carefully. Too carefully. My hands weren't steady, but I made sure the movement was controlled, deliberate. I reached for my water, took a sip. Then another. Bought myself seconds. Every eye stayed on me. Waiting. My sister's mouth curved just slightly, like she was already rehearsing how she'd thank me later. Like the outcome was inevitable. My mom leaned forward a little, hopeful. My dad stood still, watching me with that familiar look. Expectation edged with impatience. Say yes. Be good. Don't make a scene. The script hadn't changed in 32 years. Golden child in the spotlight. Me somewhere just behind it, useful when needed. Straight A's for her meant celebrations. My B's meant lectures. Her graduation had a guest list that spilled into triple digits. Mine got a reservation at a chain place off the highway. When she got engaged, my parents threw a party that probably cost more than my entire wedding. One they hadn't contributed a single dollar to. I told myself I stopped keeping score, but sitting there, watching them divide up my life like it was already theirs, every number came back, stacked, unpaid. I exhaled slowly. The thing is, they didn't know everything. They didn't know about the quiet conversations I'd caught pieces of over the years. the ones that stopped when I walked into the room. The way my name would drop into a lower register like it wasn't meant to be heard. They didn't know how those fragments had started to connect, and they definitely didn't know that 3 months ago something in me had shifted just enough to stop ignoring it. I'd started paying attention, really paying attention. What I found didn't fit the version of family they liked to perform. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Small movement, but it cut through the room. A few people leaned back slightly like something had changed direction and they weren't sure how. My dad's expression tightened. Just a flicker. My sister's smile paused, then reset. I unlocked the screen. For a second, I let it sit there in my hand. Not rushing, not reacting the way they expected. Then I looked up. Before I answer, I said, my voice even, almost calm, "There's something you should probably hear." The table stilled. Not silent, just waiting. I tapped the screen and started reading. The air had already shifted. There was no going back to whatever this was supposed to be. Not after this. My hand was steady now. Too steady. The shock had burned off, leaving something cleaner underneath. Focused, precise. I scrolled through my emails without rushing, past the usual clutter, until I hit the one from that morning. Perfect timing. Almost surgical. I pushed my chair back and stood. The table quieted again, but this time it wasn't curiosity. It was tension. A few forks hovered midair. Someone shifted in their seat. My dad sat down slowly, satisfied, like he'd already done his part. My mom kept smiling, though it was starting to strain at the edges. My sister leaned forward just a little, eyes fixed on me. I lifted my glass. "I want to make a toast," I said. My voice didn't shake. If anything, it sounded lighter than it should have. That made a few of them relax. I could see it. Shoulders dropping, small smiles returning. They thought I'd folded, that I was about to thank them. Play along. I glanced down at my phone. I got an interesting email from the bank this morning. A pause. Then I started reading. The final payment on my mortgage has been processed. A couple of nods. Someone murmured something approving. Which means I am now the full, unencumbered owner of my property. That landed. Completely mortgage-free with an estimated market value of approximately $450,000. The sound came next. A fork slipping. Metal hitting porcelain too loud in the silence. My cousin's glass tipped, rolled, then dropped. Someone inhaled sharply like they'd just realized something didn't line up anymore. I didn't stop. I scrolled. And the bank also wanted to update me regarding another matter. Now the silence tightened. Specifically, a loan application submitted under my name. My sister's posture changed. Barely. A stiffening through her shoulders. The application has been denied, I continued, due to fraudulent information. Her face lost color so fast it looked like someone had dimmed a light behind her skin. Including the listing of me as a cosigner and guarantor on a $300,000 loan? No one moved. Without my knowledge or consent. Somewhere behind us, a phone started ringing. It cut through everything, shrill, misplaced. No one reached for it. My sister's husband stared at his plate, not blinking, not reacting, just gone. My mom's smile froze. Not faded, froze. Like her face hadn't gotten the signal yet. I kept reading, my voice carrying across the table, steady enough to feel deliberate. I became aware of irregular activity 2 months ago when my credit score dropped unexpectedly. Now they were all looking at me. Not waiting anymore. Watching. Multiple applications had been submitted using my personal information. Credit cards, personal loans, even a vehicle lease. A shift in the room. Chairs creaked. Someone whispered something and immediately stopped. All of them listed my sister's address as a secondary contact. That was it. The moment it stopped being abstract, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressing in from all sides. I lowered my phone slightly, just enough to look over it. I filed a police report 3 weeks ago, I said. My dad tried to speak. His mouth opened, then closed again. Nothing came out. I hired a lawyer, I continued. Contacted every bank involved, all 3 credit bureaus. My sister started crying. Not the controlled version from earlier. This was messy, sharp. She tried to breathe through it and couldn't. Her husband leaned in, muttering something under his breath, trying to pull her up. Sit down, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. He stopped. Actually stopped. Like something in the room had shifted just enough to remind him he wasn't in control anymore. I looked back at the screen, then up again. The reason they need money, I said, isn't medical bills. My aunt let out a small, broken sound. My uncle stared across the table, his expression hollowing out in real time. It's about $90,000 in debt. No one interrupted. Bad investments, gambling, sports betting, crypto schemes that didn't pay off. My brother-in-law's hands came up, covering his face now. They maxed out their credit cards, I went on. They're being evicted. Each sentence landed harder than the last, not louder, just heavier. And when they couldn't get approved anymore, I let that hang for a second. They used my identity. The word used didn't feel strong enough, but I left it there. They applied for loans, opened accounts, tried to take out a second mortgage on my house. That got a reaction, a sharp intake of breath from somewhere to my left. That one failed, I added, because I'd already placed fraud alerts on the property. My mom found her voice then. How can you say this? She demanded, too fast, too high. She's your sister. She's pregnant. Do you understand what you're doing right now? I looked at her. Really looked. Did you know? The question didn't echo. It just stayed there. She didn't answer, but her face did. A flicker. Guilt, then fear, then something defensive trying to cover both. Enough. I turned slightly toward my dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That told me the rest. This, tonight, was never about helping her. It was a cleanup. Get me to hand over the house. Frame it as generosity. Solve their problem quietly before anything official caught up. Wrap it in family. Present it like love. I felt something settle into place inside my chest. Not anger, clarity. The police are already investigating, I said. My sister shook her head, crying harder now. I'm sorry, she choked. We were going to fix it. We just needed time. My lawyer has issued cease and desist letters, I continued, not raising my voice, not rushing. I've notified every bureau. Every account is flagged. I'm pursuing full legal action for identity theft, fraud, and forgery. The words didn't sound dramatic. They sounded done. I've calculated the damages at around $120,000. That got another reaction. A low murmur, quickly swallowed. Legal fees, interest, credit damage. My sister leaned forward, hands shaking. Please, she whispered. We were desperate. We were going to pay it back. I held her gaze, for once. Desperate doesn't give you the right to take my name, I said quietly. Or my future? She flinched. Good. I tilted my head slightly. And tell me something, I added, softer now. If I hadn't caught it, I let the question hang just long enough to make it hurt. If those loans had defaulted, there wouldn't have been anything left to argue about. My house could have been taken, my credit gutted. Everything I'd built, quietly, carefully, gone on paper before I even understood why. And for what? To cover bets they chose to make. The silence didn't hold. My dad shifted first, like he'd found something familiar to grab onto. You're being selfish, he said, voice steadier now, louder. This is what families do. We help each other. There it was. The script again. He started listing things. Old things. Loans from when I was a teenager. The 6 months I stayed at their house after college. Like it had been charity instead of a temporary arrangement we'd agreed on. I let him finish. Then I nodded once and pulled my phone back up. I paid back every dollar, I said. I turned the screen toward him. Plus interest, I scrolled. And I paid rent those 6 months. Transaction history, dates, amounts, receipts I'd never thrown away, even when I told myself it didn't matter. Because some part of me had known it would. He didn't touch the phone, didn't even lean in, just looked at it like it was something he couldn't afford to acknowledge. Around us, the table was coming apart. My aunt and uncle had started arguing in low, sharp bursts. My cousins leaned into each other, whispering too fast, too tense. One of them, the one who'd been clapping earlier, cleared his throat like he wanted to restore something. Look, he said, forcing it. People make mistakes. Maybe it's about forgiveness now. Moving forward. I turned to him, really turned. Would you forgive someone who stole 100 grand from you? I asked. He blinked. I didn't wait. Would you hand over your house to cover someone else's gambling debt? His mouth opened, then closed. He leaned back, eyes dropping, and didn't speak again. My mom broke then. Not cleanly. Loud, uneven. Tears, words tangled together. You're tearing this family apart, she said. Please, just think about the baby. The baby? I let that sit there for a second. I have, I said quietly. More than anything else. For 3 weeks, it had been the only thing looping in my head. What kind of home that kid would grow up in. What it would mean to be raised by people who could look you in the eye and still take from you like that. What it meant that my parents had known. Maybe not every detail, but enough to stand behind it, to build tonight around it. And beneath all of it, something older. Every birthday where I'd been an afterthought. Every holiday where my sister got celebrated for showing up while I got measured. Compared, adjusted. This wasn't one moment, it just looked like one. I'm done, I said. Not loud, just finished. I'm moving forward with full prosecution. The words hit differently now, not as information, as outcome. They'll face criminal charges, civil penalties. My sister shook her head violently, crying harder. Her husband didn't move, just sat there with his hands over his face like he'd already disappeared. My lawyer's confident, I continued. Damages will cover everything, and then some. I picked up my glass, set it back down without drinking. And the house? A small pause. I'm keeping it. That was the line. You could feel it. I'm keeping everything, I added. And I'm cutting all of you off. My sister snapped. The crying twisted into something sharper. You're heartless, she said, voice breaking. You're cruel, you're... She choked on it, then forced it out. A monster. No one stopped her. I hope you enjoy it, she went on, shaking. Your big empty house, alone, with nobody who loves you. I held her gaze. For once, I didn't look away first. I'd rather be alone, I said, than surrounded by people who only see me as something to take from. That was it. No applause this time, no cheering, just silence that didn't belong to me anymore. I stood, pulled out my wallet, and dropped cash on the table. Enough for my meal, no more. You can figure out the rest, I said, glancing at them. You're good at making financial decisions for other people. No one followed me, not right away. The door closed behind me, and the noise of the restaurant rushed back in like nothing had happened. But something had. 2 weeks later, nothing had settled. It had just spread. The fallout didn't explode, it multiplied. My phone lit up that night and didn't stop for hours. Calls, texts, voicemails stacking over each other. Family members from that table, and some who hadn't even been there, all suddenly experts on what I should have done differently. Most of them said I'd overreacted. A few tried softer angles. Family unity, second chances, keeping things private. My mom left a voicemail that ran almost 20 minutes. Crying. Disappointment. That phrase again. The man you've become. Like I'd changed into something unrecognizable instead of finally staying still. I blocked every number, all of them. The next morning, my lawyer called. More attempts. Over the past 6 months, they'd tried to get into my accounts multiple times. called the bank pretending to be me, tried to add themselves to my credit cards, pushed at every gap they thought might open. Most of it had been stopped. Not all. That was enough. The police investigation moved fast after that. The detective told me they had more than enough. Clean paper trail, recorded calls, documented attempts. The DA was already reviewing it. My sister and her husband got a lawyer. Their lawyer reached out with an offer, repayment in installments if I dropped the criminal charges. I didn't need to think about it. No. 3 days ago, my mom showed up at my house. I didn't answer. She stayed outside for 40 minutes, knocking, then yelling, then crying again. Cycling through it like if she hit the right version, I'd open the door. "You're destroying her life," she shouted at one point. "The stress is hurting the baby. If something happens..." I picked up my phone, called the police, filed a trespassing complaint. That was the moment it stopped being about them, completely. The family split after that. Most of them went with her. Easier that way, cleaner. Blame the one who refuses to bend, but not all. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years called me late one night. Quiet voice. Said she'd had money disappear once, small amounts, spread out, but had never been able to prove anything. She said she believed me. My uncle on my mom's side sent a single text. He said he understood. No explanation, just that. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. By the time the charges hit, there was no version of this that ended quietly. Not anymore. The messages that surprised me weren't from family. Those followed a pattern. Pressure, guilt, silence when it didn't work. The ones that cut through all of that came from people I barely expected to hear from at all. Old high school friends. People I hadn't spoken to in years reaching out like they'd been watching from a distance the whole time. A couple of coworkers I trusted enough to give a vague version of what was happening, even my ex-wife. We hadn't talked since the divorce finalized over a year ago. Her message was short. She said she'd always thought my family treated me like I was optional, that she was glad I'd finally stopped letting them. I read that one twice. Didn't respond, didn't need to. Work became the only place that didn't feel loaded. My boss knew just enough. Not details, just that there were legal issues, and didn't ask for more. He let me step out for calls, didn't question it. My coworkers didn't hover, didn't pry. They just adjusted. An extra coffee would show up on my desk without a word. Someone would check in with a simple, "You good?" and leave it there. No pressure to explain. It was quiet support. And it mattered more than I expected. The house changed too, not overnight, but enough. It felt emptier at first. No background noise, no anticipation of someone dropping by unannounced. No mental checklist of how things should look if family came over. But under that, it felt lighter, like the space finally belonged to me. I started moving things around, replacing furniture I'd kept because my ex had liked it, changing colors, taking down things that had never really felt like mine but had stayed because it was easier than deciding. For the first time, I wasn't setting it up for anyone else. I was just living in it. My sister's lawyer reached out again yesterday. The tone had shifted. Less confident, more urgent. The criminal case wasn't slowing down. If anything, it was gaining momentum. The forgery charges alone were serious. Layer identity theft on top of that, and it stacked fast. My brother-in-law was looking at real prison time, not hypothetical. Real. There's a part of me that still reacts to that. It's quieter now, but it's there. The part that was trained early to smooth things over, to take the smaller hit, to keep things from escalating. It keeps whispering the same question in different ways. Is this too far? Should you pull back? Show mercy. Then I remember the restaurant. My dad standing there like he'd already decided for me. The applause. My mom smiling like I was about to do something noble by giving up everything I'd worked for. I remember how easily they stepped over me. And that voice goes quiet again. I'm not backing down. 1 month later, it stopped feeling like fallout and started feeling like consequence. Everything moved faster than I expected. Charges were filed. Official. My sister and her husband were arrested last week. Not quietly. Not handled behind the scenes. Booked. Processed. Released on bail my parents covered by taking a loan against their own house. I didn't hear that from them. My uncle told me. He'd taken it on himself to keep me updated on things I wasn't supposed to know anymore. The criminal trial is set for 3 months out. The civil case didn't wait. My lawyer filed for damages. 160,000 now. We adjusted the number after uncovering more accounts, more attempts, more layers I hadn't even seen at the start. It kept getting bigger. My parents changed tactics again. This time, they didn't come to me directly. They sent someone else. A family friend. Someone who'd known me since I was a kid. The kind of person who remembers your birthdays without checking Facebook. He called, asked if we could meet for coffee. I said yes, mostly because I wanted to see how they'd try to frame it now. He chose a quiet place. Sat across from me with that careful expression, concern mixed with something rehearsed. He talked for almost an hour, about how devastated my sister was, how she'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to have her life destroyed. He kept circling back to the baby, like saying it enough times would change the math. At one point, he admitted my parents had handled things badly, but then he added that my response felt disproportionate. That word stayed in the air. I let it sit there for a second. Then I asked him something simple. Have you ever had someone steal your identity? He hesitated, then shook his head. No. Would you be okay losing $100,000, I asked? And just forgiving it, because it's family? He didn't answer right away. When he did, it wasn't really an answer. That was enough. But there was something else that had been sitting in the back of my mind since he called. Something that didn't line up. I leaned forward slightly. When did they ask you to talk to me? He looked caught for a second. Then he sighed. 2 days after your birthday. Before I'd gone to the police. Before I even knew how deep it went. I nodded once. That was all I needed. This hadn't been reactive. It had been planned. The dinner, the speech, the pressure from the entire table. It wasn't spontaneous. They'd set it up. Pulled people in. Built the moment so I'd fold under it. Expected me to. I finished my coffee. Thanks for meeting me, I said. He started to say something else, but I stood up. This is the last time we talk. I left him there. Watching the extended family from the outside has been revealing. I'm not invited to anything anymore, but things still reach me. Apparently, there have been shouting matches at gatherings I'm no longer part of. My aunt's furious. Less about what my sister did, more about being dragged into it. About being used as part of that setup. Some of my cousins started asking questions, not to me, to each other. One of them reached out quietly and told me several people had pulled their credit reports. Just to check. They found things. Nothing as big as mine. Smaller amounts, attempts, inquiries that didn't quite make sense at the time but had been ignored. Until now, it wasn't just me. It had never been just me. The family group chat I got removed from apparently collapsed in on itself. Screenshots started getting passed around. Messages from my parents over the past year. Asking for money. Framing it as short-term help. Always a different reason. Always urgent. Always with a promise it would be paid back quickly. It never was. And now, for the first time, everyone else is starting to see the pattern, not all at once, but enough that it can't be unseen anymore. No one's getting that money back. Not the cousins who wired short-term help. Not the aunts who were promised repayment in weeks. Not anyone who said yes because it was easier than asking questions. That realization is starting to settle in now, and it's not landing softly. My sister's pregnancy isn't going the way they expected either. I didn't hear it from them. I heard it the same way everything reaches me now. Secondhand, filtered through people who aren't supposed to be talking to me. Stress complications, partial bed rest, doctors telling her to slow down. Like that changes anything. My mom managed to get one last message through before I blocked her email too. It was long, rambling, but there was one line that stuck. If she loses this baby, it will be your fault. I read it once, then again. I won't pretend it didn't hit. It did. Not cleanly. More like something dull pressing into a bruise that was already there. That old instinct kicking up, the one that says fix it, absorb it, make it stop. But I didn't respond. Instead, I brought it to my therapist. 2 weeks in, and she's already better at cutting through the noise than anyone in my family ever was. She didn't soften it, didn't let me reframe it into something more acceptable. She made those choices before the pregnancy, she said. The consequences didn't start with you. You just didn't stop them this time. That stayed with me, because that's the difference. I didn't create this, I just refused to carry it. The house has settled into something steady now. Not empty, just quiet in a way that doesn't feel like waiting anymore. I've started having people over, not family, not obligation, friends, people who show up because they want to, not because there's something to gain. Conversations that don't circle back to what I can provide. No one's scanning the room like it belongs to them. It's different. Better. My lawyer called yesterday. Another offer. They're shifting again. Less denial, more damage control. This time, they're willing to admit everything. Full restitution, spread over 10 years. Interest included. In exchange, they want me to support a reduction in charges. Probation instead of jail time. It's the first offer that isn't insulting. Which makes it dangerous, because it almost makes sense. My lawyer walked me through it carefully. If it goes to trial, there's a real chance they'll declare bankruptcy afterward. Even if we win, collecting could become its own battle. Years of it. This way, I'd get the money back. Structured, enforceable. They'd still have criminal records. It wouldn't disappear. It would just look different. Cleaner on paper, messier everywhere else. I told him I needed time. And I do. Because there are two versions of me sitting with this. One that looks at it practically. Numbers. Outcomes. What actually gets me whole again. And the other, the one that sat at that table for 32 years. The one that learned over and over that I came second. That what was mine could be reallocated if someone else needed it more. That part doesn't care about efficiency. That part wants this to go all the way through. Wants there to be a line that doesn't get softened at the end. I have a meeting with the prosecutor next week. I'll decide after that. Not before. For now, I'm doing something I've put off for years. Not because I couldn't. Because something always came first. Money needed to be saved. Time needed to be available. Someone else's preferences had to be considered. Not anymore. I booked a trip. 3 weeks. Europe. Just me. No compromises. No one else's schedule to work around. No quiet calculations about what I should postpone. I'm leaving soon. And for the first time in a long time, it doesn't feel like I'm escaping something. It feels like I'm finally choosing where I go next.